Mexican immigration to the U.S. skyrocketed in the 1910s and 1920s. This was because of the instability caused in Mexico by the Mexican Revolution at the time. Furthermore, employment opportunities boomed as the mining and agriculture industries in Southwest America flourished. As Mexican presence in America became more prominent in the early 1900s, discrimination against Mexican Americans grew more than ever. Hence, in this time period, Mexican Americans saw themselves segregated in Southern California in various public facilities like swimming pools, movie theaters, and residential communities. For instance, in 1910, a proposition to establish separate schools for Hispanics in New Mexico caused outrage and confusion. Nevertheless, as more and more Latinos flowed into different parts of America, segregation against them increased, and segregated schools for Mexicans became increasingly widespread. In opposition, various minor movements began taking place. In Colorado in 1914, a court case took place to integrate Mexican Americans into the standard schooling system. In 1919, Mexican Americans protested due to alleged segregation of kids in an LA school. Unfortunately, the segregation of schools went on. By the 1940s, 80% of Mexican children in California went to separate schools. A major reason for this was that Mexican Americans were stereotyped to be influent in English because of their darker skin. Though many Mexican children could indeed speak English very well, they were put into Mexican schools with inferior facilities, underqualified teachers, and overcrowded classes. In these tough times for Mexican Americans, Gonzalo and Felicitas Mendez saved up money through farm labor in Orange County, relocated to Santa Ana, and rented a farm. They then leased and moved into a farm in Westminster, California, owned by Japanese immigrants displaced into internment camps during World War II. Gonzalo Mendez was a Mexican who immigrated to California at just 7 years of age. Felicitas Gomez Martinez, who was Puerto Rican, immigrated to Arizona at 10 and just 6 months later to California. The two married in 1935, when Gonzalo was 23 and Felicitas was 20. In 1944, Sylvia Mendez, Gonzalo and Felicitas' daughter, went with her aunt Soledad Sally Vidauri, her siblings, and her cousins to enroll in the local school. The school rejected Sylvia and her siblings for they were of Mexican descent. However, Sylvia's aunt, Sally, had married a Mexican-French man named Frank Vidauri, making her children's skin lighter and their surnames seemingly less Mexican. Hence, the school allowed her children to enroll. This was likely because the school assumed that they were white and could speak English fluently. In response to this outrage, Sally rejected the offer and abruptly replied, "We're going home." Upon reaching, she told Gonzalo about the situation. Gonzalo felt as if it was the government's responsibility to provide all of its citizens with equal rights, and he perceived his right to stand for this cause. As a result, this rejection from the white school fueled the determination that led to the case.
Sylvia Mendez was just 9 years old when her family began their case, which exposed clear examples of prejudice against students of Mexican descent. At the time, Mexican Americans were legally considered white under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, as it guaranteed citizenship through naturalization to any Mexican who chose to stay on land annexed during the Mexican-American War. Despite this, schools started unofficially separating Mexican-American students. This was because white families usually had a better socioeconomic situation. Many people at the time were extremely racist and didn't want to share their good schools and resources with people of darker skin. Gonzalo and Felicitas Mendez hired a lawyer named David Marcus to represent them. They gathered together and worked with 4 other families facing similar problems, allowing for a common goal within the petitioners. On March 2, 1945, these families from Orange County, including the Mendez family, filed a petition against 4 local school districts. Members from other families included Thomas Estrada and William Guzman from Santa Ana, Frank Palomino from Garden Grove, and Lorenzo Ramirez from Orange. Their petition alleged that 4 Orange County schools segregated students of Latino descent, violating the 14th Amendment. According to Sylvia Mendez, David Marcus advised Gonzalo not to pursue the case solely for his children, but rather for all children. due to the potential the case had in making a huge difference in civil rights movements. In addition, Gonzalo Mendez reimbursed families who feared they would lose wages in court, ensuring their support in the case. On the same day of the petition, a summons was issued to the school district, requiring them to respond to the petition within 20 days, about 3 weeks. On April 4, 1945, the Orange County Council, along with the defendants, requested the judge to dismiss the case, arguing that the court lacked jurisdiction over the matter. Despite their efforts, the trial was scheduled for June 4, 1945, in the Southern California's District Court. During the trial, attorneys David Marcus and Thurgood Marshall employed an innovative strategy, presenting social science evidence to support their claim. They claimed that segregated schools instilled feelings of inferiority within Mexican-American students, hindering their ability to become productive Americans. Additionally, they argued that segregation in Orange County schools violated the 14th Amendment. U.S. District Judge Paul J. McCormick agreed, ruled against the discriminatory practices, and demanded they stop. This approach was likely used to persuade the jury and judge by showing them the practical effects of segregation. The school districts argued that Mexican-American students were segregated based on perceived English fluency and not due to discrimination. They claimed that the facilities were equal under the separate but equal doctrine, and asserted that students of color self-segregated by forming their own social groups and limiting their interaction with the white student populace. However, the plaintiff's evidence of truly unequal treatment outweighed the school district's misleading claims. Judge McCormick ruled that a paramount requisite in the American system of public education is social equality. It must be open to all children by a unified school association, regardless of lineage. In other words, Judge McCormick stated that Mexican schools with unequal facilities went against the Constitution's promise of equal protection under the law. On March 30, 1946, the defendants, representing the Orange County schools, filed a notice of appeal, indicating their intent to challenge the ruling in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. On February 25, 1947, the Ninth Circuit upheld Judge McCormick's decision, agreeing with the devastating socio-economic impacts of school segregation. This officially concluded the case. The Mendez v. Westminster case paved the way for many advancements in equality by race. The effects of Mendez on education were undeniable. It led to California abolishing segregation in its schools, making it the first state to do so, and setting a much-needed example for other states to follow. Hence, the case allowed Hispanic students to stay in school around a year longer. The students were around 19% more likely to graduate from middle and high school, proving that integrated schools with better resources led to a more successful population. By enabling more Hispanic students to graduate, this case facilitated access to higher education, leading to better jobs and improved socio and economic conditions. Furthermore, Mendez was not only significant for Hispanic students, but for all marginalized racial groups facing segregation. Both African Americans and Hispanics endured discrimination, and the precedent set by the case also transferred to African American pupils, allowing an equal education for all. Apart from that, Mendez v. Westminster was crucial in shaping the ideas of Thurgood Marshall, an NAACP attorney, as he used the Mendez-inspired tactic of employing social science evidence in the Brown case. Furthermore, the case later helped Thurgood Marshall to effectively destroy the separate but equal doctrine, which allowed segregation, but only as long as the quality of the facilities were equal for both races. Another major movement the case inspired were the East LA walkouts, during which nearly 20,000 Latino students walked straight out of their classes in protest with the inequalities in the education they were forced to receive. Unfortunately, the case has fallen into the realm of forgotten history. It is overshadowed by its more famous counterpart, Brown v. Board of Education. In the face of this injustice, we must ask ourselves, what would happen without the influence of this case? Would Earl Warren be able to write the Brown v. Board majority opinion without Mendez's example? Would Thurgood Marshall have the knowledge he needed to win Brown v. Board without his prior experience? Would the prosecution's arguments be as effective if they weren't already tested in the Mendez case? The Mendez v. Westminster court case was one of the most influential of the 20th century, impacting our lives by inspiring civil rights movements, laws, and a growing sense of respect for our fellow man. Changing norms, Mendez v. Westminster has significantly shifted our country's perspective on racial segregation for the better. Truly a fight for all.